Hi everybody, Steve from Steve's Makerspace. In this video, we'll be going over how to get started with the new fxhash params and fxlens. I'll be taking a simple project I've written using the P5 web editor and going through all the steps needed to turn it into a params project and publish it on fxhash. I'm going to assume that you already know how to do a regular fxhash project. If you don't, then I strongly suggest you start with these two videos of mine. There will be links in the video description to those videos and to all of the resources I'll be mentioning. I strongly suggest you read everything you can find on the fxhash website about params and also read the information on their GitHub page. Also, IceRain wrote up a short tutorial on params that covers the highlights of what I'll be discussing, so I recommend checking that out. In order to use fxlens to test your params project, you need to be using desktop coding software. You can't use the P5 web editor or the Open Processing web editor for that. I will be using Visual Studio Code for coding and will assume you have no experience using it. If you know how to use Visual Studio Code, then you can skip the installation part. You should know that I am a noob myself with Visual Studio Code and had to learn just enough to make my first params project. So if you have questions about Visual Studio Code, I am not the person to ask. IceRain might be a good resource, or post to the params support channel on the fxhash Discord. Okay, let's get started. We'll go to Google and type in Visual Studio Code. Go to the website. We're going to download. I'm assuming you're in Windows. And the download should start automatically. Then you can open the file, accept the agreement. I would suggest just hitting next, 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 next. You might want to create a desktop icon and then install. I've already installed it, so I'm not going to install it again. The fxhash site says that you need Node and NPM also installed. To find out if you already have Node or NPM, we'll go to the search and type in COMM to get the command prompt. Click on the command prompt and type in node space -v for version, and that will give you the version. I've got 18.15.0. You need to have at least version 14 installed. Now, if you don't have Node installed, we'll go back to Google, type in node install. Make sure you're downloading from the Node website, and we can do Windows installer, and now it's downloading. Open the file. Then you can just hit next, next, next until it is installed. Now it's downloaded, so open the command prompt again. Type in node space -v for version, and you should see a version, hopefully. You can also type in npm space -v, and you should see a version of npm. Apparently, npm is now automatically installed with Node, so hopefully that won't be a problem. You can close the command prompt. Next, we're going to go to the fxhash boilerplate on GitHub. Link is in the video description again. So we need to clone the repository, and all that means is that we need to get a copy of all of these files. So if you go on this green code button, now you have a choice here to open with GitHub Desktop, but if you do that, your code is going to be linked with this repository, and we don't want to do that. So let's just download the zip file. Now I'm going to open that zip file. I'm going to extract all. And we want to save this somewhere where we can get to it. So I've opened up my documents folder, and I'm going to drag this into my documents folder, the whole thing. And now before I open it in Visual Studio Code, let me rename this folder. Let's call it fxhash project. So now let's open Visual Studio Code. If you have your desktop icon, you can use that, or you can just search for Visual Studio Code. And we can open a folder right here, or we can go to File, Open Folder. Navigate to where you saved your folder. Click on this, select Folder. Now you see we have a couple of folders here. One says Public, and one says SRC for source, I believe. If we look in the index, This has the params information. If we look at the fxhash site, this stuff right here is being created by this information in here. And what's showing here right now is just a sample of each type of parameter that you can have. Now, most of our code is going to be in this public folder over here. Let's go to the example I created in the P5 web editor now. So I've created something that does something very simple. It makes some random circles, or I can change this to make random rectangles, and it's got a background. There's a frame around it, or you can choose not to have a frame around it. So just a few variables to play with the params. I don't want to redo all this, so I'm just going to do File, Download. Now I'll open that, extract all, and I've got some files here. Now notice I've got the full P5 library is here. That's got 3,800 kilobytes in it, but I don't actually need the full P5 library for most projects. I could use the P5 min, which is a smaller version of P5. So if we go to the p5js.org, we can go to the downloads page and scroll down a little bit, and you'll see P5 min.js. Click on that. So now we're downloading the P5 min. We can open the folder. We don't need to open the file. I've already downloaded this a couple of times, so it's got a 2 behind it. We'll fix that when we drag it into the editor. So what you can do is you can drag files directly into Visual Studio Code. So I want the p5 min.js. Notice this is only 893 kilobytes. I'm going to drag that right into the public folder, right like that. Now I want to rename this so it doesn't have that 2 in there. So I'll hover over it and do a right click and click rename, and then we'll get rid of that 2. Now here's the param example that I just downloaded, and I want the sketch to be in here. So I'll drag the sketch over to here. Now I don't want to drag the index over here because the index here has the whole fxhash snippet that I'm going to need for the params to work. So I don't want to replace that, but we do need to add some code right here in order for the code to recognize the sketch and the p5 min that I just added. Now I want to do a save on this before I do anything else, but if I just do File, Save, it's only going to save this one file, this index.html. If I want everything saved, I do need to do File, Save All. So now I've got everything saved. I want to go look at another project because I want to make sure I get exactly the right wording here. All right, so this is what I want. I need the script source p5 min. Let me just copy this and then open up our current project, and I'll paste that. So this is what you're going to want to see here. Now, if you look at a regular fxhash project on the web editor and look at the index, you'll see that this is pointing to the library. It's got a website, and you don't want that. And then for the sketch, you see here, it's pointing to sketch.js. There's not a // in front of this. So for the fxhash, you want to make sure it's got the / here. And that this is not pointing to a website, but is actually pointing to a downloaded P5 library. So one more thing, and this one I actually got from IceRain. He said to install the P5JS Snippets. So under extensions right here, click on this, and you want to type in P5JS, and you should see Snippets show up at the top. Click on that and click Install. I've already installed it, but just click on Install here because that is going to allow the Visual Studio Code to autocomplete all of the P5JS special words, functions. So that will be very handy. Now, to get back to where we were before, you can hit this Explorer, and you can also just X out. You can see that things that we've looked at before are showing up as tabs at the top. So I can just X out of this Snippets. As long as we're here, this is where you would rename your project. So let's say we wanted to call this circles or something. I'll do a save on that. Now there's a hotkey here, Control S. So let's just hit Control S to save it. Now in my web editor, I was using seed equals random 9999, etc. But now that I've got the fxhash stuff, I can use seed equals int fxhash rand times 99999. And then down here you see I've got random seed, noise seed. So that way I don't have to use fxrand all over my code. I'll call the fxrand once, and then that's going to seed all of my P5 random functions. And one more thing down at the bottom, I've got the fx preview that is necessary, so I can uncomment that out. Now, we need to install npm. To do that, we're going to click on Terminal and New Terminal. And that brings up this area down here. And then type in npm space install. And that is installing the npm. Okay, that is done. So now we should be able to do npm start and see something. Let me see. There we go. We've got our P5 web editor project is now showing up here. Also, this other stuff is showing up, and we don't want that. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code, and I think that is in the index towards the bottom. I believe we need to get rid of some stuff. Notice there's two things named index here. One is index.html up here in the public folder, and this one is index.js in the source folder. So I'm going down to line 64, and let me just take all of this and do Control/ to comment all of that out. I think I can comment all of that. Let me hit Control S to save that. And then let's go back to here. This is the fxlens. And you can see that that gobbledygook that was at the top is now gone. And I can just see my circles. Awesome. And this stuff over here, right now it's not going to do anything except maybe if I change this, I think it might change. No, that's not even doing anything. Oh, wait. If I hit refresh, let me click on auto refresh. Refresh. Ah, here we go. Okay, so this does change. Great. So at least that is working, but these params are not pointing to my project at all. These are just those example params that they had set up. So now we can finally get into the fun stuff. So let's start with the number of objects. So I've got 15 objects that are going to be drawn right now. Let's go to the index. And up here we want a number for number of objects. So let's replace this with number of objects, and we'll just say number, I guess. And it's type number, a default. Let's say the default is 15. And we want to make sure we keep that comma there. And then the options, what's the lowest amount we want? What's the highest amount? Let's say we want at least 4 and as many as 30. And the step size, these need to be stepped by 1 instead of fractions. Now I'm calling this number. So instead of number of objects equals 15, we're going to override that. And we need this to have param. I believe it's param or params. I can't remember. I need quotes number because that's the variable I used. And let me save this and just see if that works. There we go. We've got our number of objects right here, and it's set to 12. I can, let's click on auto apply, and I'll increase this to 22. We'll decrease it to 6. We got as little as 4 and as many as 30. Awesome. And we can lock this or unlock it, and I can click on refresh to get a new fxhash. Awesome. With the fxhash projects up to this point, it's been important to narrow your parameters so that you don't get duds in the outputs. But with params, you can actually widen your parameters, taking them to the extreme. So here I've got all of these over to the left, and I get this, but then I can move all of these over to the right, and I get something like this. And neither one of these are necessarily duds because it's the minter who decides what they want. You still want a lot of good outputs, but you don't need to work towards having 0 duds. Next, let's use the selection because I've got circles or rectangles. So let's go back to here, go to the index, and find the language for selection. So here's their example of a selection. The selection I want is circles or rectangles. So we'll put circles, rectangles, and then we can get rid of this. I don't think we need a default. And then the type needs to remain a select. Name, we'll do type of object. So this is what is going to be appearing. And here for ID, let's say object type. So then over on my sketch, let's copy this language here, paste it here, and instead of getting the number, we're going to get object type here. And so object type equals object type. It doesn't matter that I'm using the same variable here because this variable has to do with the params and this variable has to do with the rest of my code. So let me do a save all. We'll go back to here, and now I've got type of object. I've got a drop down menu. I can select circles or rectangles. There we go. Now I also have a frame around this, but I could do a Boolean to select, do I want a frame or do I not want a frame? Let's go back to the code and into the index, find our Boolean. Here it is. So this is going to be frame, question mark, I guess. And the type is going to be Boolean. The ID frame select, and then we'll go to our sketch. And here I've got border equals true. Let's copy this down to here, and we'll say frame select. We'll hit save all. I'll go back to my lens, and I've got frame question mark, and I can click here, and now I have a frame, and if I unclick it, there's no frame. Ta-da! Let's go back to the code. We'll go to the index. There is a string ID, so you can enter a string if you want. I don't know what you would use that for unless you wanted some sort of word to appear in the art, and you could give the user an option to have a specific word like their name appear in the art. That would be pretty cool, actually, if you could make art out of someone's name. All right, I'm sold. But let's get rid of this. I'm going to just comment it out so it doesn't show up. This big int, I don't know what you would use that for. I'm going to just comment that out. The last parameter I want to do is a color selection, allowing the user to select their background color. Right now in here, I'm just putting in a background color. If we look at the params, I actually already started messing with this. This said something like color selection. So I've changed this to bgcol and this to background color. So then we go over to our sketch. Now, if I use bgcol equals fxgetParam bgcol, that's the same format I used with the other ones, this is not going to work. And I'll override the background color with background bgcol and get rid of this. Let's file, save, go look at this, and nothing is showing up, unfortunately. Although I do have the background color here, and I can select the color, but it's not producing anything here. The color selector is a special thing. Instead of getParam, we need to use getRawParam. So let me comment this out and comment this in. So we need to use getRawParam, but we also, that's going to return a hexadecimal number, and it's missing the hash that goes in front of a hexadecimal in order for P5 to recognize this as a color. So I've got the hash plus getRawParam. Let me save that. One other thing that would be useful to know is how to look at the console log. So if I print the color, so I've got color colon space plus bg color, and we'll save that. We go over here, but where is the console log? Well, in Edge, at least, if you hit F12, you can open DevTools. I don't know if that's true for every browser, but that's true for Edge. And we can see down here the color, and the hash mark was already added by us here. So if I didn't have that added, then all you would see is the hexadecimal number without the hash. And now we've got a background color, and the user can change this. Ta-da! But there is one problem with this, sort of. The user can also change the alpha here. So they can make a strong alpha or a very light alpha. I have two concerns about this. One is that the user isn't going to realize that they have control over the alpha channel and are going to be confused when they can't make the color that they want. The second thing is that you as an artist might not want them to control the alpha. You might want them to pick a color but not change the alpha. So how do we get around that? Well, first we need to convert this to a color using the color function. Then we need to use the red function, the green function, and the blue function. And so we'll have the background with the red, the green, the blue, full alpha. And if you wanted part alpha, then you can control that yourself right here. So let's save that now and go take a look. And so now I can change the color, but the alpha down here is actually not doing anything anymore. One more thing I want to cover. Right now this is set up so that if you get a new hash, you're going to get a new output. But we can set this up so that what the user sees is what they're going to get when they mint. We're going to override the hash here. And the fxhash team is okay with us doing this. So let's copy this number of objects item because it uses a number, because that's what we're going to use is a number. And instead of number of objects here, we'll rename this one random seed, and we can call this seed. Then over here in the sketch, instead of seed equals int fxrand, we'll copy this here. And actually, I think we can put this right here. We don't need to worry about this at all. And then we'll change this to seed. And let me go, one more thing I want to do back here. We also want the minimum, let's say, to be 0 and the maximum to be a whole bunch of 9s. And we'll go step. We could do step 0.1 maybe. And then the default, let's use the fxrand for that. fxrand times 9999. Let me save all of that and see what we get. And I'm not getting anything. I forgot to say seed equals. That's what I did wrong. Let's say save that. Go back over here. There we go. Now, if I do this, I should get nothing. And let's put that to auto reply. Yeah, so this is doing nothing, but if I change this, now it changes. So now the user will be able to design their piece and mint exactly what they see. I recommend if you do this though that you give an explanation and a warning. This is my explanation here. The first parameter is a random seed that overrides the fxhash seed. This means that what you see is what you get. It also means that two mints would be identical if both use all the same parameters. I hope no one does this. Please make something unique. So make a statement something like that so people are aware of the risk of minting without using the fxhash. So let's say we've got our project working the way we want. Of course, I could reorder this if I wanted. So if I wanted the background color up higher, I could just do like this and move it up here. And now the background color is in front of the type of object. One tip on Visual Studio Code, if you want to tidy code, it is Alt-Shift-F. So Alt-Shift at the same time and then F, and that tidies code. Now I think we're ready to save our project. So first I'm going to hit Control-C to terminate and hit yes. And now it's npm space run build, npm space run space build, and it is saved a zip file. Let's go look at that. So under the fxhash project dist-zipped, this is what it has saved. So let's go now to fxhash and we'll go to the sandbox and we'll take our dist-zipped and drag it into this box. Start test. There we go. It's working. We can retry with the same hash. We can do a new hash. We can change this. Fortunately, we have to submit params. There we go. We can add a frame, change it to circles, change the number, submit params. Ta-da! Awesome. We can open live. Make sure it looks the same as it does on here. Make sure it looks the same as you change the size. So it works in Sandbox. Now let's get to minting. So we'll mint generative token. I've carefully checked my file. Next step, we'll drag our dist-zipped into here. Upload. We can test it again. That's interesting. Clearly there's something a little off about the way I've written my code because it's not all showing up. But I'm not gonna stop the video to fix that right now. So let's say I want to keep these for my project. My generative token works properly. Next step, type of trigger. I'm going to use my programmatic trigger. I'm using FX Preview from Canvas. I'll type in Canvas. All of this is pretty much the same. We'll do a test capture. Oh, that looks better. We'll do next step. Assume everything looks fine. We'll do next step. Number of editions. So we'll do 100 of these at a fixed price at 3 TES. And we'll schedule our opening. The royalties, let's say 15. Grace period. So the grace period, not totally clear on what this grace period is all about, but it has to do with having to buy a ticket first and then you're minting later. I'm using 7 days here. That's recommended. That means that the user has 7 days to turn their ticket into art. And if they don't, then someone can buy their ticket. Reserves. Now you may want to do a sample params project. I did that for my project where I did 5 items and I reserved all of them for myself so that I could just test the params. So let's say it's enabled. We'll go to the next step. The number of variations. So there's a pre-mint and a post-mint variations. You can decide whether you want to disable on one or the other. number of variations. Instead of doing infinite, I would suggest doing constrained to a list of hashes and params, and then mess around with your params to get a sample of what it's capable of doing. So let's say we want to save this one, and we'll add the current hash and params to the list. So let's add that. This is a really boring project, of course, but if you have params that do radically different things, then you want to show that off. So if we look at my project, Espresso Dreams, and I have these variations, so I'll click on this. So this one is sort of a standard variation, but here I've got a much more abstract variation. So I'm showing the user that you can do different things with this project. And here's another sort of abstract variation. So that's a good reason to add a list of variants to your project. So we'll hit next step. This part is the same as usual. We'll do circles, we do a description. Here we'll do our final preview. Here's our final preview. We can do our variations. Now this doesn't have a params here, but when it's published, there will be a params button showing here. One thing to keep in mind with params, especially when it comes to the number of items you're going to offer and the price you're going to offer, is that collectors who want to just flip, they want to buy and sell, are not interested in params because it takes a lot of time to create the piece of work that you want to keep. They just want to have bots buy and sell. So you're not going to get that type of collector collecting your art. I think it means that you're not going to have a lot of secondary sales. People are going to keep whatever it is they create. So I think that means that you might want to increase the price. If you think you normally have a 2 TES project that then is flipped and winds up being sold for 4 TES, then maybe sell it for 4 TES to start with, possibly. Although if you're watching this as soon as this video comes out, the market is terrible right now. We're in a bear market and people aren't buying hardly anything. I hope that changes soon. So that is everything I wanted to go over with you on FX params and fxlens. I hope you know just enough to get started. If you like this video, please give it a like, consider subscribing to the channel, ring the bell for notifications. Comments, I love to read your comments, especially if you have any comments on params or on Visual Studio Code. Please leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye now. Steve's Makerspace.